Hello. On April 9th, I gave a Culture of Excellence brief at the Reserve Center in Tampa. It was the last in a long, 3-year-long series of briefs that I gave to my unit, this one celebrating and marking my retirement from the Navy. Some people couldn't be there that day, and unfortunately no one recorded the whole talk. So what you're about to hear today is a reenactment of that talk that I gave on April 9th. It is called Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen. Today, I want to talk about Korea. Beginning in 918, Korea existed as a separate country, an independent empire, and that lasted all the way until the year 1910, when it was annexed by Japan. It remained in their control, their influence, until the end of World War II. At that time, the nation was divided, much like Germany was. It's something we never hear about, though. In this case, the North went under the control of the Soviet Union. The South was established as a democracy under the influence of the United States and the Allied powers. That split was formalized in 1948 when two nation states were established. But that state of being existed only for a couple of years, because on June 25th of 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea. The war almost ended before it even started because it was going really, really poorly for the South. Within 2 months, South Korea had lost almost all their territory. They'd been pushed back into a very corner of the peninsula that was known as the Pusan Perimeter. But then the United Nations got involved once they received assurances from the Soviet Union that they weren't going to send in their ground troops. Led mostly by U.S. forces, but with the help of over 30 other nations, a counteroffensive was launched at Incheon, and enemy forces were not only pushed out of the south, but North Korea was pushed to the brink of defeat. But then the Chinese got involved. They'd made no such promises as the Soviets had. And ground in the north was lost, and the front was reestablished right around the 38th parallel, which was where it began in the first place. The next 2 years were mostly a war of attrition. The front was pushed back and forth a few miles at a time, but mostly it stayed right there and nobody gained anything. But every nation lost a lot. South Korea lost 171,000 people killed, 32,000 missing, 566,000 wounded. For the U.S., casualties included 36,914 killed, 4,564 missing, 92,134 wounded. Hostilities ended on July 27th of 1953 when the armistice was signed. But the two countries are still officially at war, since no peace treaty was ever negotiated. Frequently, Korean War is known as the Forgotten War, perhaps because it occurred so quickly after the end of World War II. And perhaps because it's perceived as a short war, which really wasn't true. Our involvement there was a little bit less than a year shorter than our involvement in World War II. And while we're not actively fighting in Korea, we're still there today. As we sit today, and as you listen to this, about 30,000 American troops are keeping the watch for us there in Korea. And now, with this little brief introduction, you know more about the Korean War than most Americans. If Americans do know anything about the Korean War, they probably didn't learn it from me. And they probably didn't learn it in their high school history class either, since we never got that far. They probably didn't learn about it from regular news media outlets either. No, if Americans know anything about the Korean War, they probably learned it from the TV show MASH. MASH, the TV show, debuted in September of 1972. It ran for 11 years. As I started preparing this, I realized the show debuted 50 years ago. When I finish, you probably aren't going to tell me that your parents watched it. You're probably going to tell me that your grandparents watched it. And once again, it is another sign of how old I am. But I digress. The show had an ensemble cast that went through many changes over the years. The CO started out as Henry Blake, became Sherman Potter. The surgeon who was a major started out as Frank Burns, became Charles Winchester. The sidekick was Trapper John McIntyre, later B.J. Honeycutt. There were only 4 characters who were present throughout the show's full run. Corporal Max Klinger, more on him in a minute. Major Margaret Houlihan, the career Army nurse. The chaplain, Father Francis Mulcahy. And of course, Alan Alda as Captain Benjamin Franklin Hawkeye Pierce. With over 250 episodes of the show recorded, they had the opportunity to address an awful lot of topics. Some of them were ahead of their time. They're things that we talk about here today. Things like human trafficking, PTSD, sexual harassment. Sometimes they introduced fun characters. 2 of my favorites were Dr. Sidney Friedman, the resident psychiatrist, and Major Sam Flagg, the CID officer who appeared several times over the first several seasons. You might remember him as Major Flagg, but you might also remember him as Colonel Flagg. He was one of the very few people who got promoted over the course of this show. There was Flagg, there was Klinger, and there was the chaplain. The only ones who ever got promoted. This show was designed to entertain, to make us laugh. But it was also intended to have a message. They showed a clear view of right and wrong. They taught the viewer their perspective as to how we should interact with others. And they provided for us 3 lessons that I want to pass on to you today. 3 simple yet important ideals that I saw first in a TV show, that I've experienced in 28 years as a chaplain, and that I hope to instill in you today. Item number 1. I mentioned some of the cast changes in the show. Much like any military unit, personnel were coming and going on a regular basis. Sometimes it made things better, sometimes, well, not so much. But the lesson here is simply this: embrace change. Embrace change. Not many people really enjoy change, and I don't think we have to in order to be successful. But we need to embrace change. It's harder for some people than others. One person for whom change is not easy, who's here today, is my wife, Mary. Mary's life has been a picture of stability. She lived in 3 houses in her first 50 years of life, all located within 6 miles of each other in Lansing, Michigan. When we lived there in Michigan, she worked for 1 employer. Heck, this woman has only had 4 cars in the last 32 years. 34 years, since 1988. She's had 4 cars. But then I came along, and she needed to learn how to embrace change because, well, things tend to change for me a lot. I've seen a lot of change in my 28 years in the Navy Reserve. When I started, we had Navy Reserve Centers, and then we changed their names and they became Navy Operational Support Centers, NOSCs. Well, now they're back to being Navy Reserve Centers again. The people who worked in those places, when I started, they were called TARS, Training and Administrative Reserves. Well, then they were called FTS, Full-Time Staff. Guess what? They're called TARS again. I've had billets in 11 different reserve centers over the course of the last 28 years, from Florida to Hawaii, a total of 13 different jobs. During my time, the Navy has given us at least 3 different working uniforms. It's probably more, but I spent a lot of years with the Marine Corps and had 2 or 3 different working uniforms over there as well, so I've lost track. Heck, just in the 3 years that I've been in 06, we've had 3 different rank insignia to go on that working uniform. You know, the camouflage uniform with the tab. We started out with the black on green, which everybody misread as being an E4. Then we went to the silver on the camouflage background, and now it's a black background with white. 3 of them in just 3 years. We reservists, when I came in, we had pink ID cards. And those cards were not good to get us into the commissary. We had very limited privileges. We went from that to green ID cards. And then finally, they gave us CACs. Our orders went from paper to the NROS system. Travel claims went from paper to the DTS system, and somehow we all survived. The physical fitness assessment went through many changes as well. Scoring changes, event changes, cycle changes, and I survived. Thanks largely to the exercise bike, which became an option for everyone in 2008 and ended my career as a 3-mile-a-year runner for the Navy. My civilian life has been just as volatile as my Navy career. I went from being a full-time pastor to being a nonprofit administrator to being a professional pilot. I started a business, and then I sold it when I realized I was never going to make enough money to pay all the bills. I really don't want to add up all the jobs that I've had. There has been a lot of change. Mary and I went from being involved parents, spending countless evenings in gyms and at fields and by courts, watching our kids. We went from that to being empty nesters, hoping they would call or even come for a visit once in a while. And then we moved on to being awesome grandparents who enjoy spoiling the next generation every chance we get. And you can't see Mary today, but I can tell you, she looks way too young to be a grandmother of 8, with 3 more grandkids on the way this year. Change isn't always easy, it isn't always fun, but it is the way we create our success in the Navy and our success in life. The year I got selected for 05, I had a conversation with another chaplain who was being forced to retire as an 04. Turned out he had spent his entire career in one reserve center, bouncing back and forth between the 2 or 3 chaplain billets that were available there. He didn't give the selection board any reason to believe he would grow into the role that he wanted, and so they didn't give it to him. If we want to be successful in life, we must embrace change. Sure, what we had was good and we're probably going to miss it. But what is to come might be even better. And someday it's going to come the thing that we are missing when inevitably it changes as well. Change opens doors. Change creates opportunities. In a television show, change gives writers new storylines to create and to grow. In the Navy and in our civilian lives, change gives us new storylines to create and to grow. There's absolutely no reason that everyone who is hearing this cannot use the change we all experience in our lives to make our lives better, to make our careers better, to make our families better, to make our Navy better, to make our world better. When change comes into our lives, and it always does, we have 2 options. Sit around crying about the past and worrying about the future, or get to work and make a difference. In the words of the great movie philosopher Andy Dufresne, you either get busy living or you get busy dying. Today, make the decision to get busy living. Embrace change, grow with it, and find good in it. Item number 2. Going back to MASH, I want to focus on one character who lasted all 11 seasons. And it's the one you were least likely to guess. I want to focus on Max Klinger. When the show opened in 1972, Max was a disgruntled corporal who wanted out of the Army. He thought the best way to get out would be a Section 8 discharge. I'm sure all of you know that he was referring to Section 8 of Army Regulation 615-360, which governed the separation of enlisted soldiers from military service. Section 8 meant you were mentally unfit for military service. Klinger's most common means of trying to prove that he was mentally unfit was cross-dressing, which would likely have been very effective at getting him kicked out in the 1950s. But it didn't work. He tried other things as well. He also threatened to set himself on fire in one episode, coating himself with gasoline. In another, he tried to eat a Jeep. When MacArthur came to visit the unit, He dressed up as the Statue of Liberty. But then after season 7, Gary Berghoff, who played the company clerk Radar O'Reilly, left the show. And Max was given a new job at the hospital and a new role in the show. And he gave us the second item for today's brief. Transform yourself. Klinger started out as a lazy soldier who wanted nothing except to get out of Korea, return to his hometown of Toledo, Ohio, and root for his favorite team, the Mud Hens. But when the circumstances in which he found himself changed, he decided to transform himself. It took hold in an episode early in season 8. Max was just stepping into his new role when he found out that the unit was without a generator. Earlier, this would not have been his concern. But he decided to try something new. He used every resource he had and a few that he stole to get a new generator. When he saw the impact that he had made, he decided he liked the change. And with that, it became more than a change. It became a transformation. He went from being a corporal trying to get out to being a sergeant who kept his unit together. In the final episode of the show, Klinger married his Korean girlfriend. She wore his old wedding dress. And he made the decision to stay in Korea after the war while they searched for her family. Now that was a dramatic transformation. In 28 years in the Navy, I've had to transform myself as well. The biggest change is when you go from 04 to 05. As the chief of chaplains at the time told me, as an 04 chaplain, you do ministry. As an 05 chaplain, you do administry. I had to transform from being a tactical chaplain who got to spend all of my time ministering to our sailors and to our Marines, to a strategic chaplain who had to spend much more time doing administrative tasks and, frankly, dealing with the knuckleheads that we all know about. I've also been blessed with the opportunity to keep my hands in the real work of a chaplain as well. When I was at the Reserve Center in Raleigh before I came here, I was able to lead a worship service in the mosque every Sunday, and we had a blast. Now, I'm an old-fashioned high church Anglican, and there I was preaching to a whole bunch of Carolina Baptists. But they came, and they enjoyed it, and we had fun as we shared our faith. Since I've been here, I've kept my hands in the tactical as well by delivering these Culture of Excellence briefs each month. It's a good deal of work putting these together, it really is, but it's also a ton of fun. And when I have the positive, warm reactions that I get from so many of you, it makes all the difference. And it gives me the energy that I need to continue the transformation. Transforming oneself doesn't necessarily mean that there was anything wrong with the earlier version. It just means there is more that you can do. The question I want each of you to ask yourself right now is simple. Right now, today, is the person that I am the best possible version of myself? Is there more that I can do, more that I could be, if I was willing to transform myself? If there is, the next question follows, are you willing to do it? Are you gonna do it? Are you willing to let go of what you think is good in order to find something that is great? The ship that is still tied up to the pier will never have a journey which is worth writing about. It will never discover anything that can change the world. Its sailors will never experience the opportunity to change themselves or to transform themselves. Now, as a Navy chaplain, I'm very proud of my Navy Sea career, all 7 hours of it, when I was on a ship that wasn't tied up. Mostly I'm proud of the fact that I didn't throw up on that ship, because the destroyer got bounced around pretty good, and when they fired the big guns, I didn't duck. I'm pretty proud of that too. But metaphorically, I left the dock, and you can too. Transform yourself into the best version of yourself that you can possibly envision. Item number 3. In MASH, there were many episodes where the characters were presented with problems to be solved. In one episode, an orphanage that Father Mulcahy was supporting needed money. Well, Hawkeye and Trapper invented a fake doctor, got him put on the payroll, and sent his entire salary to that orphanage. In another episode, there were wounded GIs who needed to be recovered from North Korean captivity in order to be treated. The Army doctors, well, they headed to the front themselves in order to make the exchange, in order to give those soldiers a chance. A soldier suffering from PTSD in the form of hysterical paralysis. Well, in that episode, Hawkeye protected him from Frank Burns, who thought he was just given up. There's countless other examples of times when the main characters took risks in order to help others. And that is the third item that I want to leave with you today. Accept opportunities to help others. They come into our lives all the time. In each of our lives, virtually every day, we're presented with an opportunity to help someone who has absolutely no chance of helping us in return. We need to take these opportunities. It could be as simple as letting a driver cut in front of you on the way out, or as great as donating a kidney. It could be for a complete stranger, or for your best friend, or for that in-law who never really liked you. It might be something that involves your time, or your money, or both. But we have to take the opportunities. Sometimes we give these opportunities a name, and the one I like best is mentorship. I was in the Navy at a time when all chaplains were told they had to have a mentor. Well, that doesn't work. A mentorship only works when someone who wants to be guided enters into a relationship with someone who is able to offer the guidance. But when you see someone who is looking for direction and you have the experience and the knowledge necessary to give it, take the opportunity. In my Navy career, I have mentored young chaplains and seen several go from the reserve to active duty. I have mentored applicants for the Naval Academy and been thrilled to see their successes. I have mentored countless sailors and Marines, sometimes for a day, sometimes for a year. And I've gone to bed many nights thanking God for the chance to impact someone else's life. Mentoring does not mean you're signing up for a lifetime commitment. It only means that you are willing to share your knowledge, your wisdom, your experience with someone who has less of those than you do. And all of us have some area in our life where we have that exceptional knowledge or that exceptional experience. Please be willing to share that with others. That's how we make a tremendous difference in this world. And to demonstrate that I believe in taking opportunities to help others, I am announcing today the continuation of these Culture of Excellence briefs beyond my retirement. Beginning in May, I will post a brief like this around the first of each month on a topic which is of interest to me and hopefully will be of interest to you. I'll keep doing it as long as somebody watches. That will be my new opportunity to help others, hopefully. If you'd like to be included in that, hit the like button. I think there's one. Send me an email, send me a note, make a comment, and I'll make sure that you find out when I post something new. And now we come to the end. Now we come to the time when I will leave, and I did leave the Reserve Center for the last time. After 28 years, 2 deployments, somewhere around 300 drill weekends, 25 or so annual training events, at least one conference of some sort or another every year, at least one day of active duty in at least 18 different states that I could remember, 9 years of recruiting for the Naval Academy, 9 casualty calls, all with Marines, leading to at least 3 funerals. I've done a few Navy weddings. I've done some Veterans Day events. I even marched in a parade. Every day I've put on this uniform has been a blessing. Everyone who came to me for advice or counsel or just to complain about their chief, a special memory. The support of my family, priceless. Proverbs 31 says, "Who can find a wife of noble character? She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value." Thank you to my wife, Mary, for allowing me the privilege of serving my shipmates. Those here today represent thousands I have encountered over the years. Thank you for listening to my stories. Thank you for laughing at my jokes. Thank you for tolerating my interest in the trivial. Thank you for serving our country daily with honor and courage and commitment. It has indeed been an honor to serve as your chaplain. I thank you for that as I sign off and leave this career behind. May God bless you all.